Mount Everest, the tallest peak on Earth, has long been a symbol of human endurance, adventure, and exploration. Towering at 8,048 meters, it sits on the border between Nepal and the Tibet Autonomous Region of China. The journey to the top of this majestic peak has been one filled with challenges, triumphs, and even tragedies. The history of hiking Mount Everest is a fascinating tale of ambition, technological advancement, and the indomitable human spirit. 1. Let's start at the beginning. Mount Everest's journey to fame began long before climbers set foot on its slopes. In the 19th century, British explorers and surveyors, during their efforts to map the Indian subcontinent, recognized Everest as the highest point on Earth. It was officially identified as the world's tallest peak in 1856. Prior to this, it was known only by its local Tibetan and Nepalese names. The British named it after Sir George Everest, a former Surveyor General of India. However, this name was never widely accepted by the local communities, who continued using their native terms Chomolungma and Sagarmatha. Despite its prominence, no one attempted to climb Mount Everest until the early 20th century. At this time, access to the mountain was extremely limited. The region was remote, and the political situation in Tibet and Nepal restricted foreign access to the mountain's base. 2. The first expeditions and attempts. The first serious attempts to climb Mount Everest came from British expeditions in the 1920s. After the end of World War I, interest in exploring and conquering uncharted territories surged. Mount Everest became a prime target for these adventurers. The British Royal Geographical Society and the Alpine Club organized expeditions in 1921, 1922, and 1924. These early expeditions were conducted from the north side of the mountain, which is in Tibet. The 1921 British Reconnaissance Expedition was the first official expedition to explore the mountain. Led by Charles Howard Barry, the team mapped routes and identified potential paths to the summit. Although they did not attempt to reach the top, their findings laid the groundwork for future efforts. In 1922, the second British expedition made history as the first team to climb beyond 8,000 meters, a feat never before achieved by humans. However, the harsh conditions of the mountain proved too difficult, and the team did not make it to the summit. The following year, in 1924, a tragic and mysterious event would make Mount Everest even more famous. George Mallory and Andrew Sandy Irvin set out to reach the peak. They were last seen on their ascent not far from the summit, but they never returned. It remains one of the greatest mysteries in mountaineering history whether they reached the summit before they perished. In 1999, a team found Mallory's body on the mountain, sparking debates that continue to this day. 3. Post-war expeditions and breakthroughs. Climbing efforts were put on hold during World War II, but interest resumed in the late 1940s. After the war, Tibet became closed to foreigners, so climbers had to look for alternative routes. Nepal opened its borders to foreign climbers in 1950, shifting expeditions to the southern side of the mountain. This change allowed for new strategies and renewed hope of reaching the summit. In 1951, British climber Eric Shipton led an expedition from the Nepalese side, using the Khumbu Icefall route, which would later become the standard route for most climbers. Shipton's team did not reach the summit, but they did discover a feasible way to navigate the treacherous southern slopes. This discovery would set the stage for future attempts. 4. The historic ascent of 1953. The first successful ascent of Mount Everest is perhaps one of the most iconic moments in exploration history. In 1953, a British expedition led by Colonel John Hunt set out to conquer the peak. After careful preparation and several camps established along the route, 2 climbers finally made their bid for the summit on May 29, 1953. Edmund Hillary, a beekeeper from New Zealand, and Tenzing Norgay, a Sherpa of Nepalese descent, became the first known people to stand on the roof of the world. The news of their achievement was announced on the morning of Queen Elizabeth II's coronation, making it a celebration on 2 fronts in Britain. The success of Hillary and Norgay was a result of careful planning, the development of climbing technology, and the invaluable knowledge and experience of local Sherpas. Their ascent marked the beginning of a new era in mountaineering and inspired many to take on the challenge of climbing Everest. 5. The rise of commercial expeditions. After the successful ascent by Hillary and Norgay, the route to Everest became more accessible, but it was still far from easy. Through the 1960s and 1970s, climbers from various countries attempted and succeeded in reaching the summit via different routes, including the less traveled and more difficult West Ridge and North Ridge. Also, each successful expedition brought new tales of courage, and each failure underscored the risks and unpredictability of the mountain. By the late 1980s, the concept of commercial guiding on Mount Everest began to take shape. Companies started offering guided expeditions, allowing climbers with varying levels of experience to attempt the climb. This shift led to an increase in the number of people reaching the summit, but it also brought new challenges, including overcrowding and environmental concerns. 6. Tragedies and triumphs in the modern era. The growth of commercial expeditions made Everest accessible to a wider range of climbers, but it also led to some of the deadliest tragedies in mountaineering history. One of the most well-known disasters occurred in 1996, when 8 climbers lost their lives in a sudden storm near the summit. The events of that year were later chronicled in the best-selling book Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer, bringing the risks of commercial expeditions into the public spotlight. The book was also made into a TV movie in 1997. Despite the dangers, the appeal of climbing the highest peak on Earth continued to draw adventurers from all over the world. Advances in technology, better equipment, and more experienced guides have improved the safety of expeditions, yet the mountain remains as unpredictable as ever. Each year, new records are set, including feats like the fastest ascent, the youngest and oldest climbers, and even climbs by those with disabilities. 7. Environmental and ethical challenges. As more people flock to Everest, concerns over environmental degradation and ethical dilemmas have come to the forefront. The increase in climbers has led to a rise in the amount of waste left on the mountain, including discarded oxygen canisters, tents, and even human waste. Efforts to clean up the mountain have been initiated by various groups, and stricter regulations have been implemented by the Nepalese and Tibetan authorities to limit the number of climbers each season. There are also ethical debates around the treatment of Sherpas, who take on the dangerous tasks of setting up ropes, carrying supplies, and guiding climbers. While Sherpas are crucial to the success of expeditions, their safety and well-being have sometimes been overlooked. In recent years, there has been more awareness and advocacy for the rights and fair compensation of Sherpas, who risk their lives to help others achieve their dreams. 8. The legacy of Mount Everest. Mount Everest has become more than just a mountain. It is a symbol of the human desire to push beyond limits, to explore the unknown, and to conquer what seems impossible. From the early explorations by British expeditions to the historic ascent by Hillary and Norgay, to the modern-day commercial climbs, the history of hiking Everest is a story of perseverance, innovation, and a passion for adventure. Despite the challenges, the mountain continues to attract climbers of all backgrounds. Each season brings new stories of success, failure, joy, and heartbreak. Whether driven by personal ambition, a love for the mountains, or a desire to honor those who came before, climbers continue to flock to Everest, ensuring that its story will keep evolving for generations to come. The history of hiking Mount Everest is rich and complex, marked by moments of extraordinary achievement and heartbreaking loss. It is a journey that spans over a century, involving explorers, scientists, and climbers from every corner of the globe. As the world's highest peak, Everest represents the ultimate challenge for many, yet it is also a place that demands respect and responsibility. From its early days of mystery and exploration to the bustling commercial expeditions of today, Mount Everest remains an iconic symbol of adventure and the pursuit of dreams. As long as there are mountains to climb, the story of Everest will continue to inspire those who dare to reach for the highest heights.